you. Okay, good. Thank you.
I'd love to do a round of introductions if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm Judy Berman. I'm the executive director at Capitol Hill Village on Capitol Hill in DC.
My name's Scott Price. When I was in my day job before I retired, I worked with the United States Navy on a number of projects involving massive amounts of data. So dealing with the National Village Network on its data challenges is a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
I'm Carolyn Rourke. I'm with the Village Low Link down in the Piedmont of Virginia. And we have been collecting data on our services ever since we launched in 2016. So we have a very rich body of data, and I'm very interested in the Taxonomy project, and particularly how it is going to expand to be able to include data that's collected on the Club Express platform.
I'm Patricia Clark. I'm with Glover Park Village in DC. I think we're working on that project with you, Judy, but if we're not, we're trying to. And we're also just recently making the switch from Club Express to Helpful Village and trying to be more rigorous about collecting data. In the early days, it didn't really matter, but now that we have grants and things, we have to be more precise and more robust with our data collection. So look forward to this.
I'm Susan Shulkowski. I'm with North Chevy Chase Connections. I'm the treasurer, amongst other responsibilities. And I'm just interested.
Doug?
I'm Doug Gaddis with Silver Spring Village, and we have been pretty good at collecting data, but it changes frequently. So I would like to get some institutionalization of what we're collecting and how we can compare that with other villages.
Great. And Sandy just showed up. We're just doing introductions, Sandy, if you want to introduce yourself.
And you're still muted, Sandy.
Sorry, I'm with Cleveland Woodley Park Village, and I kind of am aware of what's going on, but I just want to review it.
Great.
Scott, what village are you with?
Cleveland Woodley Park.
No, Scott is with Capitol Hill Village.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Scott is a member volunteer with Capitol Hill Village. Well, I wonder if there's any specific questions from what we talked about. I've got some more slides that I can show you. You can sort of look at, you can see what we've collected and what we're sort of imagining, some of these things looking like going forward. But if folks have some general questions that they want to ask about what I presented already.
I have a general question.
Sure.
Is this primarily, the data collection, is it primarily on the volunteer services, or are you also focused on financial reporting? In other words, the best way to classify your income and expenditures on a P&L. So if you were, and for a budget, so if you were going to go to write a grant, you would have the information in the correct format. Yeah,
no, so we're not dealing with that. Okay. There are, I mean, I think it would, it would be a great idea, and maybe Village to Village Network can help, or Wave can help facilitate that, is for people to share their, share the categories that they're using. I mean, Capitol Hill Village has been around for 15 years. There are categories now in our books that we no longer use, or that, it's like, oh wait, we had that category, why aren't we using that? I mean, so it's messy, and I think it would probably be helpful for people to share and sort of see what works. You know, but that's not what the taxonomy really is about, the content of the village services and events.
Okay. Thank you.
And Susan and Judy, I've taken note, this is Layla, I've
Yeah.
taken note that it sounds, Susan, like you would be interested in a section for budgeting when it comes to preparation for preparation for grant eligibility. And
Well,
other
there's
That
different.
and, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a couple of different things, right? I mean, there's the sort of the and I don't know, my brain is just not, I didn't sleep well last night. You know, there's like in QuickBooks, you've got the categories, like how you categorize your, you know, your general ledger, right? Like what those categories are. And then there's budgeting for grant purposes, and those are related, but they're not the same thing. I was assuming that you were talking more about the QuickBooks, like what are the, you know, like what are the revenue categories that you use, and what are the expense categories that you use for, you know, for keeping your books. Was I wrong?
Actually, I'm interested in both. So Layla, I would say, to answer your question, I don't know whether it matters from a data collection point of view, or from any point of view, whether villages are consistent in the way they categorize their income and expenditures. Or if, you know, I would be interested in a session sometime where villages could share how they're categorizing their things. I come from a business background, so it's, you know, I'm picking things that are very unique to our village activities. And then on the flip side of that is the budgeting. You know, what do we need to be showing in order to provide a budget to somebody for grant applications? So that's what I'm looking for.
Thank you. I've taken note.
Okay.
Right. All right. Well, it's on that list. Does anybody else have any kind of general questions about what we're doing? All right. Oh,
I do have a question that most of you working together may already be in the know on, but some of this is how to best use this to drive increased volunteer participation or interest.
okay.
You know, what can be gleaned from this, and how can it be put forward to recruit not only members but volunteers?
Okay.
And possibly partnerships.
Yep. Well, good. Let me show you. I'm gonna go and share the so starting it really is annoying the way the way Zoom covers what you're trying to see. What is that green line? Does anybody know what that green line is? I've never seen that before.
Judy, when you did this the last time and you hit from the beginning, it kind of put it into the right format, which showed us one slide.
Yeah. All right. I'll go back and do that. Oh, is it showing two slides? You know what's interesting here is one of the things that's happening is, so I have two screens. I'm working on a laptop and I have a screen, and normally I keep my keep it on duplicate and I just use my larger screen. But for some reason, when I'm starting to share, it is suddenly converting to, it's giving me a second screen, which then I can't see as I'm doing it. So anyway, and now I've just lost. Oh, and this is being recorded too. Wonderful. Okay, everybody. All right, let's try sharing the screen again. There we go. How's that?
That's good.
Perfect.
Okay. So this was the data that we showed from, this is what Helpful Village put together from the data that we had. I think it was about 31 villages, right? There were a bunch, and Pat, DC Village, most of the DC Villages data is represented here. And as you'll see, what the taxonomy allows us to do is to say of the, among these 31 villages, it doesn't matter what they call it, but we can agree that downsizing and organizing support is something we recognize that as an area where a fair number, like 7% of our requests are in there. So we can also look and say home maintenance and repair is actually, and pet care and support are among our higher demand areas, right? Now these are going to vary by village, they're going to vary by region, and so I think, but the interesting thing here is that I think we can look at this and we can aggregate. We can finally say to our government, to our funders, villages are contributing this many services, and if we put a dollar value to the hours served based on volunteer services, we can give a dollar value to how much value villages are giving back. But more recently, so, there's been some issues with the vendors, right? Helpful Village was initially a very strong partner. They embedded the taxonomy into the system. And so each village was able to, if any village who agreed to, could say, yes, I want to be in, yes, here, take my category, right? No names, no nothing, just, we have pet care, we have check-ins, we have, we do driving based on distance, whatever. And then Scott and I and, a couple of other volunteers would code those to the taxonomy. Back end, Manuel would then plug those in, and then the village didn't have to do another thing. Right? The village would just go about its business, planning its services and ordering, matching requests and things like that. And Helpful Village could spit out at the end of a month or whatever, a taxonomy report for that village and for any village, right? Manuel is not, he's got strong concerns about confidentiality and about getting permission. That's what he says. That's why he won't share the data for analysis. Run My Village went through was a merger of some kind, or it was bought. We had been in negotiations, so they were planning to do what Manuel was doing, and at the time expressed a willingness to share the data, which they already do more, I think, robustly than Helpful Village does. But they haven't yet implemented. They haven't yet done the programming to make that possible. I still have a lot of hope that they will. And I hope that folks that use Run My Village will ask for it, right? Because they want to hear about it from, from their customers. But, and this is as we suggested, a village to village network team member developed a procedure using macros in Excel to download the data. So we can get the data and we can code it, and it's not a problem. It's a little bit more work for the villages now, because villages are going to have to learn the process for downloading that data and then sharing it with us, like taking out what they don't want, anything that, like, names or any other contact information and things like that, and then, which they have total control over, and then sharing it. But, we don't want Excel spreadsheets with people's names and addresses and phone numbers, sort of crisscrossing across email. It's just not safe. So we do have to be mindful of that. But this is actually a very exciting development, that this process that we thought we would only need to use for standalone systems can be used for Helpful Village and Run My Village. Yeah, I see Susan and then Carolyn. You're on mute, Susan. Yeah.
Okay. So our village does not use Helpful Village or Run My Village or any
Right.
of those systems, at
Yeah.
least not yet.
Yeah.
So I guess from a layman's point of view, I'm a little unclear about how would our village start to collect this data, and in a way that would then we could dump it into your system.
Okay, great question. So the process that Pete Bardet has created would basically allow you to download from whatever system you're using, right? And then the main thing that we would need goes back to this, right? We need to code your to code your service list, right? So you have a list of services that you know, whatever you call them, right? We would attach a code to those. All right. And then you just give us your, you know, whatever your name for for your services are, and we code them to the taxonomy. So it's really just about it's how to get the download and then how to share it with us is the only thing.
So because I'm looking at this in sort of in the way that Layla was talking about, in terms of presenting this information to future volunteers as a way of saying, hey, this is why we need your help. So we haven't started doing any of this. I would prefer to start with your coding and work
well, if you need, so it would be very easy for us to give you to take the taxonomy, and then you can look and see, okay, well, you know, as long as we're doing this, let's just call it what the taxonomy calls it.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
That's what I would want to do. Is that so we could get that taxonomy from you?
Oh yeah.
And work backwards. Okay.
Yeah. That's this. Sorry. That's this.
And then the codes, do you have the codes too, or do we not need the codes?
You don't need the codes.
So we only need this.
You need this, right? So for example, why does it keep switching? It's making me crazy. It did that thing. It went over there. Okay. So for example, you know, some villages, you know, some of the rural villages, for example, you know, they organize their driving requests based on distance, right? Is it a local ride or is it a longer ride? You know, in the taxonomy, and so for them, but most of the villages we found are doing driving for a purpose, either driving period or driving for a purpose. And so that's how we've chosen to describe it. Now, if that didn't work for you and you just wanted to do driving, you know, or, you know, transportation, that still contributes. Okay, that's still,
Judy, one of the things we can do is to send Susan the data dictionary for the taxonomy.
Yes.
And that has more precise definitions of what each one of these mean.
Yep.
Great. I'm going to give you my email if I can, in the chat.
All right, Scott, will you take that up? And let's hear from Carolyn had a question too.
Right. My questions had to do with Run My Village, that they have been bought out by a larger company.
Yeah.
The tech team is still in place, you know, the players. So have they just put on hold any further discussions about this?
That's been yes. There was, so we started talking to them, I guess it was, so sort of what happened was what we kind of thought would happen, right? That Helpful Village sort of forged ahead, and then Run My Village was like, hey, wait, we're going to do this too. You know, like they didn't want to be left out. So after the conference last year, they said, yes, we want to do it. But then by the spring, and we'd been in conversations, I forget the guy's name. Is it Pete? It's not Pete.
Dan Ehrman.
Dan, right. We were talking to Dan, we got his commitment, etc. And then a few weeks later, there was this, you know, this sale. And so we were in touch with Dan after that. And it just wasn't time. So my sense is that it was definite willingness and an interest. They see the value in it. I think it's just fallen on the priority list given what they're dealing with. So we're just going to.
Have you engaged the Run My Village users group at all?
Yeah, we did initially, and we need to go back, and we just need to get this up on, this back up on their priority list. But so what that will do it'll make it easier. It doesn't change the basic concept, but it will certainly make it easier for Run My Village users. We'll code it once, and then you never have to think about it again, really, unless you know.
So how can we participate in the meantime?
In the meantime, we can work with you using the process that Pete Bardet has created. Yeah. Right. Which is a little bit more hands-on for the villages. But I think all you really need is somebody who's got some expertise in Excel, whether a volunteer or a staff person. Sure. And we should be able to do that. And I mean, that's one of the things that we will, you know, given where we are, what we will probably do in terms of fundraising going forward is like, you know, we'll try to get some experts, try to get some consultation money, you know, so that if the village doesn't have an expert on hand, that you'll be able to hire somebody to just sort of set the process up for you or something like that. Because we know it's going to be a heavy lift for some villages more than others.
So if we could figure out a way for me to get that, you know, that new system.
Absolutely. You know, put your email in the chat, and Scott and I will follow up for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Ayla and then Susan again.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One, we use Helpful Village, and I didn't realize that there had been this discussion not to share because we were participating in that, that project with our data. So one of the things is in using Helpful Village, we also still hold on to how we started prior to the existence of Helpful Village, where we do a double track of our service requests in via Google Sheets.
Okay.
So if we would like to be participating in the taxonomy project, once again, it's an operational question. Is there something that we should be doing within Helpful Village to pull information and send to you, or should we be working off of our Google Sheets in order to?
So you pull your Helpful Village data out and put it in Google Sheets at this point? Is that one of the things?
No, we actually maintain our Google Sheets almost like backup is not the right term, but there are certain visuals that we've set up in Google Sheets.
I see that you like.
Since we work based on coordinators rather than people filing their own service requests, that just for the coordinators, you can see in green that this has been filled, blue it's still pending, these kinds of things, and then which coordinator entered in the service request and some of those things.
That's a sort of a more technical question. I mean, Scott could probably answer that. But I think what we would want to do is sort of look at that, figure out which would be the easiest way for you to do it.
One of the important pieces of this project is making sure the data are reliable. And one of the benefits of what we've been focusing on is getting the data that reside naturally in these various computer systems that are used to create the relationship between the person who needs a service and the person who's going to provide it. And that's very accurate information.
And
so
whichever
of your systems has the most reliable data is the one that we'd want to use. So if whether it's the Sheets or the other system, it's the one that you think has the most reliable data.
Okay. And then my second and somewhat related question is, looking here, I see that you are doing, it looks like you might be capturing something that we have not yet begun to capture, which is the behind the scenes services and supports rather than solely the member driven volunteer supports.
Right.
And we're looking to break into that. Years, we've left that aside to understand where, if at all, you're looking at that within your taxonomy.
So the Helpful Village has a category called Village Builder, I think, as you know, and so that's where some of this, and that's basically what this is. So it's other ways for volunteers to be engaged. It's just such an important part of the village concept. But I think it's the nice thing about the taxonomy is that you can definitely add. I mean, we need to, and we're still early on, right? But if a village added a service, we would then just add a code, right? We need a way to communicate to say, like, you tell us, like, okay, we're adding volunteer engagement, and we would then have to code it, right? So we'd be able to capture it accurately. But that's that's all. Yeah.
Thank you. And my last comment was to Susan. I'd be curious, Susan, to know what you are doing to activate your volunteer service requests, if you're working off of something like Google Sheets, or just how you're handling that. And that can be an offline conversation if necessary.
Well, actually, I'm sorry. That's a perfect segue into what my next question was, but go ahead, Judy.
No, I just wanted to answer the question that came up earlier about how do we use this to actually engage volunteers. And I think, to me, this is the table that, to me, that shows that, right? So this is Village A, Village D, and this is the total, right? And this isn't a comparison about better or worse. This is a comparison like, oh wow, isn't that interesting? You guys do a lot more pet care than we do. I'm wondering, what do you do to recruit the volunteers for that? What do you is this a few members who use it a lot? Is it a lot of members who use it a little? And so these are the kinds of conversations that can come out of just looking at this report. right?
Also, Judy, to me, the category of number 6 of heavy lifting is a very interesting one. Heavy lifting is when a lot of the indoor maintenance or outdoor maintenance is a one-person deal. Somebody goes over to cut and mow the lawn or something. Heavy lifting involves more than one person. You're moving a couch or a major piece of furniture, or maybe an entire room full of furniture. And a lot of villages don't offer this.
Yeah.
Now it may very well be when other villages begin to see how popular it is at the villages that do offer it, that's where they might go out and say, well, why don't we try an experiment for 6 months? We'll offer this as a service and see if anybody cares.
Right.
And again, with heavy lifting, you got lots of opportunity to involve even high school students who want to help out older people with their homes. They'd love to go in and flex their muscles and get a free can of soda.
Right. But you can see how it,
or SSL hours.
Right. Right, exactly. So you can see how this kind of reporting creates a different kind of dialogue, right? So we have, at WAVE, we've got, oh, there's this really interesting program that we're doing, and, somebody can talk about it, but, are we doing that from a place of knowing how many villages are actually doing anything about brain health, right? Well, the taxonomy will then be able to show it and say like, wow, this is an area that we should really try to push because it's more, because there's not a lot of folks doing it, or there is, those kinds of things is what I'm hoping the kind of dialogue that the taxonomy will generate among villages. And then obviously for, for funders or for other stakeholders that we want to demonstrate our value, this helps us do that. Right. And this combined report helps us do that. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say, but I wanted to make sure I answered that volunteer question. So Susan and then Pat.
Okay. So, 2 things just came up for me.
Okay.
That, to answer Layla's question, and I was actually going to mention this even before when Scott mentioned reliable data. We use village rides, the JCA village rides. Does anybody know about them?
No.
We use village rides. We've been using them since the beginning, which is now going on about 5 years. And we used them initially. It was their software set up to connect those people who needed rides with those volunteers who were vetted and background checked and all that to give rides. But they also were able to allow us to expand it to include offering other services. Big picture, big fishbowl, other services. So I'm wondering whether we can take whatever reporting capabilities are available in that and translate it, if you will, into this taxonomy.
I'm quite sure that you could. I'm wondering, I'm not familiar with village rides. Do a number of villages use that?
I don't know, actually, to be honest. I just know that we got we got hooked up with the Jewish Council on Aging, who was offering this program, and they get federal grants to fund this Village Rides program, and to offer other things to us. But so I'll look into that.
Well, because ideally, Susan, the goal would be that we would work directly with them to get them to update their software with this, and then that takes the pressure off of the users, right? Rather than having each user have to do it separately. So, I mean, it can work either way, but that's been sort of the goal, is to get it into the programming so that the villages don't have to do, just don't have to do anything in order to make this work.
That's what I was thinking in terms of starting from scratch with an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc or whatever. I could just start with the Village Ride software, and then maybe I'll look into that, and maybe I will find out who the contact is, and I can hook them up with you.
Great.
And go from there. Okay. And the other thing I was going to ask is, does it make sense? Like when we first started the village, and the first thing we wanted to find out was what are the needs of our neighbors. And we did a what's it called, a monkey survey or whatever.
Yeah, Survey Monkey. Yeah.
Thank you, Survey Monkey. I wasn't involved in it. Somebody else put it together. But I'm wondering if taking your taxonomy listing that you showed before and maybe just condensing it a little bit, and
Yep.
creating a survey out of that and sending that out to our neighbors again would be a good way for us to get an update on what are their needs at this
Yeah.
point.
It might be the interesting thing, and one thing that I think that we really need to be aware of, right, is that the data and the way we collect it is one piece of the puzzle. The way we describe it and the narrative that we use to describe it is the other piece, right? So, absent, like, some of these things may or may not resonate with, with the general community the same way it does with village, like isolation support, or something like that. Like, somebody who's not in aging services might be like, like I'm not isolated, whatever. And so we do have to find ways to make sure that we're communicating. We can use this. You can use this in whatever way you want, right? There's no like ownership over this. But think about how you're using it to communicate, because it may or may not. We still have to tell the story, right?
My focus for finding out this information is then communicating it to the volunteers that we're trying to bring
right.
in.
Yeah,
that's a big.
But you may want to be, more specific, like where we say, outdoor maintenance, and this goes back. I mean, this is the data dictionary, right? There may be terms within that that are more going to resonate more, like gardening,
gardening,
for example.
snow shoveling, mowing the lawn,
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
yeah.
right. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, Pat. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I was in another breakout session earlier, so I may have missed all of this, but my question is it possible to just code this taxonomy into Helpful Village so that it sort of comes out?
Yes,
nice?
it is. And that was actually the first step, and it is already coded into Helpful Village. And so you just have to communicate with Manuel, say, yes, you want to participate, and he will then send the service list to us. Okay. The issue is, and I would recommend that you do that. The issue is, and this was something we talked about, is that Manuel, we haven't really been able to come to an agreement with Manuel about actually sharing the data that the taxonomy is creating. And so we're having to do a little bit of a workaround, but having it coded in Helpful Village will actually help with that as well. So yes, I would recommend doing that.
Okay, so a fundamental question is, who's Manuel?
Oh, I'm sorry. So Manuel is the owner of the Helpful Village, the entrepreneur and programmer behind Helpful Village.
I see. So what you're saying is that you're working with him to try to get permission to extract this data?
Yeah, so he has programmed the taxonomy into Helpful Village. So Helpful Village has the ability to pull reports, sort of like this. But they actually this was the one that we pulled for the Village to Village network. This is what it looks like that he can pull for us, right? Okay. So he's doing that, and he was the first. I mean, I give him a lot of credit. He bought into this immediately. When we approached him about this, he was like, "Yes, let's do it." But we're just having some differences around actually accessing the data, actually pulling and sharing the data that's in there. But I think any village at this point should be able to say to him, I mean, yeah, I want my services coded, in which case he can send it, he'll send it to us. And we'll send it back to him, and then be able to request their own report, even if he's not willing to share it sort of more broadly. So that's possible.
Okay.
You said his reasons were data security reasons, or
that's what he says. And I know he is very, he's got a lot of integrity, and I know that is something that he's very much concerned about. And he wants to make sure that he has permission at every step of the way. The thing is, though, that what we realize is that essentially, the bare bones of the data is this, right? There's absolutely no identifying information on this whatsoever, not even of the village that's involved, So it is possible to de-identify the data that we want, and in such a way that confidentiality, aside from a basic permission, like, yes, I agree to have my data, aggregated with other villages, really shouldn't be the problem. And so we're really trying to figure out, what is the holdup? Why is he not willing? And I'm not fully sure I understand it. So yeah.
This is Layla. We were with Helpful Village from the ground level. So so I really appreciate what you're saying as far as how Manuel has been very protective of data every step of the way for very good reasons. I'm wondering, and I don't know how other villages handle this. With our members, we have a series of questions that we ask them about how their information is used or how their information is accessed. That if it's possible, and this is a little bit off track here, but if it's possible to have a conversation with Manuel, and I'd be very happy to be part of this conversation, to have something that all helpful village users shop with their members in their renewals about the permission to use aggregate data for the purposes of furthering the village movement. In other words,
I do. Yeah, Leila, I think you're right. I mean,
that might be helpful.
And I think, and maybe it's just a question of, we've been coming at this, like, as you can probably tell, I mean, this is sort of an informal kind of process. Like, Capitol Hill Village started it, but it doesn't really belong with Capitol Hill Village. It belongs with the national, and so there are different pieces kind of coming at different places. And as a result of this development process, we don't have a data integrity plan. Like, we don't have a data sharing plan and like the policies and things. And it may be that Manuel is simply waiting until we have the policies. What he has said is that any data request has to have a specific purpose. Like, he's not just going to pull data for the purpose of pulling data and showing an aggregate, whatever. Well, there's this kind of in-between stage where you want to see what the data looks like so you know what you can ask of it. It's kind of, I don't know. And so I think we're kind of caught in that in-between where we need the policies and we need the specifics, but we're still in development, so we haven't got them yet. So, but I do very much appreciate your offer to be involved in that conversation, because I think, the good trusting relationships are important here. And I think also understanding what it looks like from the village side as well as from Manuel's side, like the more we can do that, the better.
And I think going straight to members and part of the conversation, since members are often advocates of the village movement.
Yes.
And that is part of the what would we say, the openness and accountability of how we use your information and what way we're going to use your information, and that it will not have your identifying information in any way. So if that's something that we could show Manuel, I think it just might work to our benefit. Yeah,
it might. Fingers crossed we can get over this hump, because but fortunately we have a workaround. So I think, either way we're in decent shape. Yeah, Susan.
Okay, so I'm just curious how this whole taxonomy project started, what its origins were, why it became something that you and Scott or whoever was initial in this wanted to do. What was the purpose of it back then?
Judy, if I could take a shot at that one.
Yes, please.
Within 2 weeks after I retired from my day job, a friend of mine who was on the board of directors of Capitol Hill Village called me and said she wanted my help to array the village data to support funding requests. And specifically, what she said was a lot of vendors get paid to provide the exact same services that Capitol Hill Village does, to drive people to the grocery store to pick up medicines for them. So if those vendors can get paid, why can't Capitol Hill Village? So that was the challenge, is how to deal with the village data in a way where we could array the data to help a local government or a foundation understand what the data looks like. And one of the very first things we did was a literature search just to find out what terms they use. So instead of calling something a wake-up call, we call it isolation intervention, because that's the terms that the researchers use. So that's how the taxonomy came together. We had a keyword list, we kept refining it, And then we developed procedures in Excel, lookup tables to map the village names with the taxonomy names, and it just kept growing and growing.
And I noticed you have on that previous report, you have a column called tax items.
Which report? This one here?
The one that shows the it said tax items. That go back. Nope, that one.
Yeah.
Tax category. So what's the purpose of the tax category?
Taxonomy category.
The taxonomy. The
I thought you
taxonomy.
meant tax, like, you know.
Yeah, no. That's the finance brain is going, oh, taxes, right?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking, you know, if you're going to request money from somewhere, maybe there has something to do with that. But okay, so mostly for funding requests, for grants, for things like that.
But also research too, right? I mean, we want to do, you know, we wanted to put villages on the map in a way that we would be more visible, right? Like we've all got these grassroots things, and we're all doing these amazing things. But to be able to talk across villages, to be able to aggregate, you know, to talk, I mean, the idea for me, so I came to this late, right? Because I was not even involved with the village when Scott and Margaret first started this. But what struck me about it was that, you know, villages, the grassroots nature of villages is part of what is valuable. Previous efforts to talk about villages in aggregate ended up using sort of lowest common denominator, right? There were a few things, like when you actually talk to villages, you find out there's only really a few things that we have in common. We really do things like kind of differently, you know, like, you know, we have affinity groups, others might have interest groups, or, you know, member groups, or, you know, whatever. There's not a lot of language that we talk about together, and that limited the ability to aggregate what we were doing. So, you know, we could talk about member services in general, but we couldn't get down to these, you know, to the specifics. And so the taxonomy is a way to help us talk about what we do in a way that's meaningful, not only to funders, but to the broader community. Like villages are doing house and home support. I mean, 2,600 instances in a course of, you know, I don't remember what the time frame was it 1 year of like these 31 villages. Like, that's a lot of services, you know? And, you know, you look at absent owners and it's like 13. Well, one village maybe does 1 or 2 a year, but together we have a much bigger presence than we've been given credit for. So that's part of this too.
Yeah, Judy, what you're saying that I find fascinating in this, and this goes back to when I was with community crisis services. So I think in the social services standpoint is so often my phrasing used to be that, you know, government can't do it alone, you know, straight up. So what does it take? You know, and the issues when we're talking about being able to stay in community and age in motion, which is what our, you know, village focuses on, is the idea that if we're going to advocate on behalf of the village movement, we need to be able to have the language that covers what the village movement is able to provide that is not otherwise provided within a government structure, because governments can't do it alone.
Right.
And to have some language, the taxonomy for this it increases the opportunity and the power of being able to be stronger at the advocacy end.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can I say one other thing too, as I'm listening to you?
Yeah.
And that is from the, I don't know how you would call it, from the person of needs point of view. Some people don't even know what they need.
That's right.
And if you can, like, I'm thinking of, you know, let's try to put a report together once I get this all in place, that we can send out in an email to our neighbors that says, hey, you know, do you need any of this? This is what we offer, you know, because some people, you know, especially people who are not willing to ask for help, but if they know there's this organized system in place where you can not feel embarrassed and other people are doing it to ask for help, then you'll get more people comfortable with, you know, if they are isolated, to join something or get involved with something or ask for help in some way. So I'm really excited listening to this. I'm maybe not using it for all the original reasons, but I'm thinking of all the kinds of ways in which I can, translate it into being useful for our neighbors.
Yeah, I think Susan, you're absolutely right. I think one of the challenges, the sort of underlying challenges with villages is breaking down those barriers to asking for and receiving help, right? Like there's a lot of different things that get in the way of people asking, and other different things maybe that get in the way of receiving. And I think that's kind of one of the important pieces of work that we do that we probably don't get enough credit for, and that in fact is not even in the taxonomy, because it's so kind of invisible. But to the extent that it helps with that, I think that's terrific.
And I'll just make one more quick point and then I will stop. And then the other part of it is in our area, we're in North Chevy Chase, Maryland. We have a lot of seniors who live alone, whose family members don't live in the area. So if we can send this out to the family members and let them know that these services are available for their loved one, then they can help facilitate getting their loved one to, take advantage of these services. And I will also say that the other place this is useful is hospitals, because we have a relationship with somebody at, I believe it's Suburban Hospital. And they're always looking for ways in which to keep people from returning to the hospital. Once they're there, they want them to be able to go home, and they want to know that there are services in place for them to draw on. So I'm thinking down the road ways, it may be something we want to present to the hospital that they can put out to their, on their network of people.
DC Villages is experimenting with trying to track some readmission rates of our members. Because that's like Medicare speak for keeping out of the hospital, that's maybe a language that they can listen to.
No, I think there's a lot of really good uses for what can come out of all of this.
So I wanted to thank Judy and thank Scott and everyone who's contributed today, listened today. We are at 12:02. We're past our breakout session time. And Susan, I wanted to make sure that you were able to send your contact information off to Judy and Scott.
I sent it to Scott.
Okay,
Scott,
great.
did you get it? Yep.
And
so whatever
else,
you can send me, please.
And anyone else who needed to share contact information, were you able to do so? Okay, so hearing that, could
I just ask one thing?
Yes.
What village was Pat Whitty from?
Cleveland.
I knew she looked familiar. I don't seem to have a way to save the chat here. So is Scott, did you get the email addresses down?
I have the chat saved, so I can.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Carolyn, thank you. And Carolyn, you're able to get that information to Judy and Scott?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The contact information. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just Jade Berman at CapitolHillVillage.org.
Right. I got email information for Doug, Susan, and Roy.
We got Carolyn up here.
Yeah, Carolyn. Yeah.
I've got Carolyn. Yep.
And that's it. So those are the three people I got information from.
And I've just sent you mine as well, because I surely have a lot to learn. So, so with that, I hope everybody has a very productive, positive and productive week ahead. And thank you so much for being here for this wave session and for supporting our new board of directors, because we surely have a lot of work to do, as you all know. So
it's not what I meant to do.
So take care. Have a great
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.